you've probably heard this where when they say, so if someone loses their parents, they're called an orphan. If you lose a spouse, you're called a widow or a widower. But there's no name for someone who has lost a child because it is not the natural event of things.
Hello, 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 and hello again. Glad to see you here. I'm sure you've been waiting for what we have for you today. Today, we're talking about a topic I shouldn't be smiling about, but I'm smiling because I know people, people have gone through it and they've come out of it smiling themselves. So, encouraging people who have grieved the loss of loved ones is what we'll be talking about today. And we have an expert. She's been through it herself and she's got tips for people who are actually going through grief and how viewers like you and I can support them and how to release themselves, from the grief and all of that. So I will be introducing to you a coach. She is a coach, so I will be sharing her link later about her. And she's actually, like I said, been through it herself. So she's going to tell us about she's going to tell us about grieving and how to support people. And without wasting our time, I would like you at this moment to like, share, subscribe, make a comment, write a question, because you never know, that question might be in someone else's heart and they want to ask that same question. So you take the lead, write the question in the comments, and let us deal with this topic together. So without wasting any time at all, I'll call on the screen Coach Detola Amure. You are welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for Bumi for having me on your show. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I know you've been through so much and you've dealt with so many clients. You're a coach yourself. So I would first of all say thank you for finding time to do this because it's really helpful, and I thank you for what you do even outside of your comfort zone, putting smiles on the faces of people who need them and adding value to the world. Thank you very much. Without saying much myself, I'd like you to introduce yourself briefly to us. Who are you?
Okay. So, like you already said, my name is Detola Amure, and I am a productivity and women leadership coach. So I coach kingdom women on how to maximize their time so that they can manifest their big dreams. Another hat that I wear, which is a fairly recent hat, is one of a grief and loss specialist. So helping people heal and release the grief that they carry so that they can move forward with new sets of emotions and move confidently in life. I truly believe that my life purpose is to activate people into a life of significance and purpose. And I do that again through my coaching and helping women particularly discover their purpose, maximize their time, manifest their big dreams, and also helping them recover when they've gone through significant emotional loss. So even though I wear several hats, they all tie to one bigger purpose, which is activating people into a life of significance and purpose. So,
Oh,
and lastly, I'm married with 4 children. One of them lives in heaven.
thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction. If I may, well, this next question actually is: how did you feel when you lost your loved one? And could you please tell us your story?
Right. So I'll try and keep it short because it's sometimes depending on how much time I can go long or I'll try and go straight to the point.
Mm.
So in 2018, I earlier on in 2018, I just given birth to a set of twins, my boy and girl twins. So and it was an exciting time for the family. It was almost like seeing it as, people will see us and say, oh, double blessing. It
Mm.
was like our joy was now complete because we already had a girl and a boy, and now another girl and a boy. So it was 2 girls, 2 boys. So it seemed like the perfect, I mean, from the outside, like the perfect family, complete. But then sadly, in December of the same year, 2 days before Christmas. My boy twin, Moraki or Caleb, was taking a nap, and I went to check on him. Found out that he wasn't breathing. We called the ambulance. They came a few minutes later. We were trying to resuscitate, but then a few hours later, after they had tried everything that they could, he was pronounced dead, and that just shattered my whole world. Like, I mean, there's still no words to express how I felt.
Mm.
And I'm sure you've probably heard this, where when they say, so if someone loses their parents, they're called an orphan. If you lose a spouse, you're called a widow or a widower. But there's no name for someone who has lost a child, because it is not the natural event of things. Every parent think or believe. I mean, it doesn't even cross your mind. Once you have a child, you believe that that child is going to outlive you. So it doesn't even cross your mind that you're going to lose that child. And so, of course, this is not to compare losses. This is more about just saying that losing a child as a parent can be very devastating. And for me, I felt devastated. I felt hopeless. I felt angry. I felt betrayed. I felt like God betrayed me. There's still no words to express how I felt. It was a dark, dark, and lonely place. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you very much. Yeah, and you mentioned that you felt like God betrayed you. I wanted to ask the question: did you feel betrayed by God, and have you overcome that feeling?
Yeah, and I think that is such a very important question, especially as believers, because
Mm,
sometimes as believers we think, I mean, we know that we would go through challenges, but we never think it could be anything beyond, anything like losing a child. And so
mm,
definitely I did feel betrayed. I felt let down. I think
mm,
out of all the emotions that I felt, that was the one emotion that stood out.
mm,
I felt let down. I felt like, you know, God pulled the chair under me and I just fell flat. That
mm,
was my, the first few months, that was how I felt. And even though I could see God moving in different ways, I was still very angry because I just thought,
mm,
but I think for me it was a case of, why would you give me twins and then take one away? And it's so interesting. I never for once laid I didn't even consider Satan in this whole picture, because I thought Satan is not powerful. He can't
mm,
take, he doesn't have the power to take. He doesn't give and he can't take. That's
mm,
and when I think about the story, the story of Job, and I read, that was one of the books that I held on to in those trying times. And funny enough, I read it recently again. When I think about the story of Job, remember it was God that actually pointed Job out to Satan. And I'm like,
mm,
God, please don't point me out to anybody. But anyway, jokes aside, I felt like God allowed it. And
mm,
I couldn't understand why. That was my biggest struggle. Like, why?
mm,
Why would you allow this to happen? Why did you even bother giving him to me in the first place? So those were some of the emotions that I struggled with in the early days. But thankfully, with time and with the help
mm,
of Holy Spirit, and going back into the word, it was almost like I had to understand what faith meant all over again.
mm,
I gave my life to Christ at a very early age, and again, yeah, I don't want to assume that the audience are just
yes.
Christians. They are different people, but again, my faith
Mm,
played a significant role in my healing journey, and so I had to go back, to understand, not to understand, but to to allow God to heal me. Because
mm,
even though I was angry at him, I knew that he was still the only one that could heal me, right? And so I had to get to a point where I now know that no matter what happens, God still loves me.
mm,
Everyone and everything in my life is a gift. I'm not entitled to them. I'm not entitled to being married, to having children. They're all gifts from God.
mm,
So I must come from a place of humility and say, okay, oh, God has allowed, me to, for example, be married or to have children. How am I stewarding that role that I have? So I
mm,
had to get to that point. And again, this took time. So it wasn't like
mm,
it took time. I had to get to a point where I learned that God allows in his wisdom what he could easily prevent by his power. And this is a quote by Graham Cook. The first time I heard it, I just thought, wow. God allows in his wisdom what he could easily prevent by his power. That really just it just stood out for me. Like, God knows beyond me. I am I am he's the creator. I am one of his um I'm one of his children. He knows the beginning from the end. And I can go on and on about this, but like I said, I had to learn all over again what faith really meant to me. And then lastly, I had to realize that God actually knows what it feels like to lose a child. When Jesus died on the cross,
It's only
he
because.
felt a lot of pain. So he actually understands how I feel. And ultimately, everything is still working out for my good. So it's taking me a while. And some days I still fall back and try and ask why, but that's not even the right question to ask, to be honest. The right question to ask is, okay, Lord, what would you want me to do with this? Rather than why has this happened? Because it has happened, right? So it's a case of, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do with this? And so changing my question actually got me into a place of being able to receive healing instead of feeling angry.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And, you mentioned a lot of things there. The God factor in all of this, the sovereignty of God. So, for people who are watching, who, if you have a faith, this is where you kind of go back to your faith and ask the one who has all the answers, and he will give you an answer. And I'm glad you found the answer from your faith. So faith plays a very important role when it comes to bereavement. Thank you for emphasizing on that. And it takes me to my next question, saying, how long does it take to grieve a loved one? How long? I know it differs from person to person, but from your experience, from people you have met with, how long? Some last forever. I know I had a talk with a psychiatrist once, and he said, well, it depends on the individual, but when it starts going beyond, um, certain kind of exhibition of some characters,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then this person needs help.
yeah.
So I will ask that question again: how long does it take to grieve a loved one?
So, like you rightly said, there is no set time
Mm,
to grieve because everyone's journey of grief is different. And
yes.
that is mainly because the relationship to the person who has passed away is unique to you. No one else has that relationship. So as a result, it all depends on the person, right? And the relationship that you had with the person who has passed away. So there is no set time. And again, because everyone grieves differently, grief is not linear. It's not, some people talk about the stages of grief, which is a myth, to be honest, because the stages of grief had to do more with when someone was given a diagnosis that they were going to die. But then with time, and it was coined by Elizabeth Rosa. Oh, I hope I've not butchered her name. Um, Her name has just skipped my mind, but some prominent lady.
Mm,
And but a lot of people now began to take the stages of grief and apply it to someone who is bereaved. There are
mm,
no stages of grief
mm,
because again the relationship is unique to you. So and it is not linear. It is not, oh, you start at denial or bargaining and then you end up at acceptance, like people would say. It can go up and down. It can go in different directions. Today you might feel a little bit better. Tomorrow you might feel sad. It's all over the place.
mm,
But that said, what tends to happen, and like you kind of mentioned, is when people um, carry around unresolved grief,
mm,
that can impact their quality of life, their mental well-being, and impact how they live a fulfilled life.
mm,
Because you might see people who 20 years later, 20 years after they've lost a loved one, they're still in so much pain. And that's because they've not released or resolved the grief around the death. And not just the death. I know we're talking about bereavement for this particular episode, but grief is beyond that. But again, let's just keep it to bereavement since that's what we're talking about. When people do not release their grief, or they carry around unresolved grief, then that's when you have people falling into depression. That's when you find people in so much pain and they can't move. It's almost like they're stuck in time and they can't move past. So there's no, how do I put it? There's no prescribed time. Again, it's all different for everyone. But that said, by taking the right action steps, you can begin to feel better. You can begin to get your life back. Actually, no, that's not correct. I mean, you can begin to move forward because now your life has completely changed. So it's not like you're getting the old life back. There's a new you that we're dealing with now. So I know I haven't really answered that question directly, and that's because there's no set time.
Yeah,
There isn't.
no set
Yeah.
time. No set time. Thank you. No set time at all. So sometimes we need to allow people, some of them it will take years, some it will just take, I don't know, go back to the previous videos I've had on grief and suggestions, so you would understand that question better. Thank you very much, Coach Detola. My next question is how can a bereaved person release their grief?
Yeah, that is such a powerful question. So again, there is so much we can say around releasing grief or dealing with unresolved grief, but
Mm,
I'll just focus on some key points. And the first one is in order to be able to release your grief or to deal with your unresolved grief, you first one need to acknowledge and label how you feel.
mm,
Now you might say, but it's quite obvious. If someone has lost a loved one, they're crying or wailing or do you see what I mean? But what tends to happen, and again, it's probably because of what society has taught us, is that most people suppress their grief. So yeah, they might cry, but they might not label exactly how they are feeling. Talk around, um, um, what has happened. Some might be vocal about it, and again, remember I said some people are different when they grieve. They might be vocal about it, but later on, as society begins to tell them, okay, it's enough now, we don't need to see you cry. People tend to suppress their grief, and in suppressing your grief, it means it's in there, it's inward. You're not putting it out. Then you're not releasing it. So you need to acknowledge and label it. Be emotionally honest about how you feel. But, and I say that with context, be emotionally honest in a safe place. If there are people around you that diminish your grief or diminish your pain, then those are not the people you want to be hanging around. You want to safeguard your mental well being. So, acknowledging how you feel, labeling how you feel. But more importantly, it's about, and I strongly believe it's about getting professional help. Now, if you're a person of faith, obviously there's a spiritual angle of things, but there's also the emotional and mental angle of things. And I always love to use this illustration. If someone was in a car accident and they broke their leg, now it's possible that God can miraculously heal that leg, right? But most people would go through the default of going to the hospital, getting that leg checked out, depending on how broken it is, they get it, maybe there's an operation done on it and then physiotherapy. All of that is almost like the pain of healing. Because for anyone who's gone through physiotherapy, I haven't personally, but I've seen um, um, one of my family friends gone through it, and it's painful, where you're almost trying to use your leg all over again. So that pain of physiotherapy would lead to your healing. Now, of course, whether if the person is a believer, they are sure that God is with them, they have that spiritual backing. But then the physical healing of their leg is a whole separate conversation. And that, for me, I truly believe is the same with grief. So you might feel well in your spirit, man, like, okay, I get it, God, I don't know why this has happened, but I trust you. But then to actually release all of the emotions that come with your pain, you need to you need to get professional help as much as possible. And for me, the way I work with my clients is helping them take the right action steps to healing, which again involves acknowledging the relationship, acknowledging the good and the bad, all of those undelivered communication that, oh, I wish this had happened differently. Oh, I wish I hadn't said this. All of those wishes or things that you wish were different, you need to be able to express them in a safe environment so that you can release your pain. So I've kind of summarized that, but there's a whole lot more to that work. But it's about taking the right action steps.
Wow.
Time does not heal. That's
Mm.
another myth. People think time, oh, don't worry, you feel better soon.
Mm, yes.
Time doesn't.
Mm.
But it is the right action steps that you take that will bring healing.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for this. It's you said a lot there. Thank you so much. Now, how are you coping with the new norm?
How am I coping? That's a great question. So, well, firstly, what I did in those early stages, I mean, after going through the whole emotions around my loss, was
Yeah.
I started looking for help almost immediately. And I think maybe because I've worked as a coach for a while and I could see that I was heading downhill
Mm.
and that I was not, first of all, I was a shadow of myself. I was not functional. I was not productive anymore. I nearly packed up my business. And so I started looking for help. So while I was getting, help from Holy Spirit, I started looking for help professionally. So by getting help for myself, because it's so easy to say, oh, I want to point to others and help others. But guess what? If you're hurting, you're gonna hurt other people. So I knew I needed to find healing for myself. And I tried traditional counseling, and I don't have anything against counselors, please. But in my own experience, it didn't work for me because it was more. All I did was talk about my pain,
Mm.
but I needed tools to help me resolve my grief around my child's death. And so that's when I went through a training program that taught me the right method, and that is what I teach people now. And so I definitely, like I said, went on a healing journey. Now, there's still obviously ups and down days, especially when his twin sister has her milestones.
Mm.
So those days are a bit low for me. But that said, one thing I can confidently tell you is that I'm no longer in pain. Yes, I might feel sad from time to time, but I'm not in pain. And when I say I'm not in pain, I'm not in that. How do I put it now? I mean, when somebody's in pain, like you feel that, like, oh my
Mm.
God, it's so, you don't even, there are no words to describe what pain
Overwhelming,
feels
yeah.
like, right? I'm not in pain. And a few days ago, I was reflecting on this that when my son died, when Morakio died, I couldn't talk about him without crying. Like, it was sobs, and I was in anguish, and
Mm.
a lot of people were avoiding me. And that's conversation for another day. But that was me. I would cry and cry. But guess what? Now, even when I talk about him, sometimes I still cry, but not from a place of anguish. It's almost from a place of just part of releasing something. I don't know how to explain
Mm.
it. I don't know how to explain it. But my tears are different.
Mm.
Obviously, they're not tears of joy, but at the same time, they're not tears of anguish. It's more like just
Mm.
acknowledging that I'm still sad, that my little one isn't here. And when I see his sister going through milestones, I'm like,
Mm.
oh, you
Sorry.
know. And I just knew that if I continue like this, I was going downhill. And I'd gone for different, a few support groups for bereaved mothers. And I would see all these women, who had gone through loss for a while and they were in so much pain. And I thought, I don't want this to be me, not from a bad place, but I knew that there was something God still wanted to use me for. And I knew that if I didn't heal, I would be useless, right? To anybody. And I didn't want that. So I wanted to still be able to hold on to the memories of my 7-month-old baby, but without the pain. And so it was a case of going on a healing journey for me and now working with others. Now that I am better. I would not have even tried to help others without getting healing myself. Because guess what? I'll just get triggered by their own loss. And I didn't want that to happen. So I went on a healing journey. Now, of course, there's still sad days, especially when his twin sister has milestones. Like she started reception last year, and that was a mixed feelings. I was happy but sad at the same time. And I was reflecting over this a few days ago that when my baby died, anytime I spoke about him, I would cry, like cry with so much anguish, so much pain. But right now, when I talk about him, sometimes I still cry, but not from a place of anguish, but from a place of sadness. And sadness and pain are two different emotions.
Mm.
But guess what? Where many people are is that they're still carrying the pain, um, which is stopping them from moving forward. But again, like I said, from time to time, I'm,
Mm.
st- I can be sad, but sadness is a healthy emotion, to be honest. So, yeah, I'm coping by making sure that I'm sticking through my healing journey and also now pouring into others and helping others.
Mm.
And like the Bible says, with the same comfort that we have received, we comfort others. So that
Yes.
actually also helps as well. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. I know so many people would like to hear this, especially people who are like, what do I do next? I can't stop thinking about this person, but channeling that thinking into adding value
Yeah.
to those who might be in your shoes in years to come or months to come. So thank you very much for this, because this is part of the healing process, talking about it and
Yeah.
sharing your heart with others. Thank you. What
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is your advice to the family and friends of people who have been bereaved?
Oh, okay. So my advice to the families of those who are going through bereavement or friends is to be available
Mm.
to them, to listen, 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 listen
Mm.
some more. Because trust me, in those early days, the griever just wants to talk, well, most times.
Okay.
And they might say the same thing over and over and over again. They might rehash the last few days. They might go over. Your job is to listen. Your
Mm.
job is not to analyze, criticize, or judge them.
Mm.
No. Your job is to listen with your heart and not your head. Because
Mm.
when we listen with our heads, we almost want to find logic in what a griever is saying. But half of the time, they are not in logic mode. They're
Mm.
in deep pain. So
Mm.
some of the things they might say might not even make sense. It might not be logical. Your job is not to try and make sense of the situation because it doesn't make sense. The situation
Mm.
doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And many of the things we say as friends and families of to the bereaved, they sound intellectual. They sound really good intellectually, but emotionally it doesn't help the griever. So try and stay away from any intellectual. At least be grateful. They're in a better place. God needed another angel. All of those things. No, please
Mm.
don't say them. Don't
Mm.
don't say them. They don't help. They don't help at
Mm.
all. If you don't know what to say, keep quiet.
Be quiet.
Just keep
Mm.
quiet.
Wow.
Again, going back to the story of Job, the best times he had with his friends when he went through his loss was when they were quiet for the first 7 days.
Mm.
Afterwards, they started talking rubbish. And that, they were just
Mm.
saying the wrong things. Please don't
Mm.
be like Job's friends.
Mm.
Don't. If you can help practically, if it
Mm.
means sitting with them, and I know, and I guess that's why having different relationships also helps because some people will be available to stay with
Yeah.
you for the first 30 days or whatever. However little way you can help, whether practically, buy groceries, because that's the last thing that the bereaved person wants to talk about and think about. Help with babysitting. Those are
Mm.
the people who helped me practically are those that I remember today and I hold
Mm.
here today.
Wow.
Not the people who will call me and say, "Oh, if you need me, call me." I'm not going to call you. I mean, I'm
Wow.
trying to think about my pain. So I'm not going to,
Wow.
I'm not in the position to be calling people to ask them for help. So, however way to help, help.
Mm.
Don't wait for the bereaved person to call you. They're in so much pain. They don't even know what they want. They don't know what they
Mm.
want. They're available,
Mm.
So, however way you can help, help
Yeah.
practically, whether it's buying groceries into the house, babysitting, taking kids to school, depending on what age and all, find
Mm.
practical ways to help. So, yeah, I think I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, sometimes I think, because I've had a friend who got bereaved just of recent, and it's still fresh in
Mm,
my mind. In
mm,
fact, on the day of the service of songs, I was just like, "Ah, so this thing is real."
mm,
The reality dawned on me. In fact, I had to leave that place to go and do my own weeping in a
yeah,
different way, because it now dawned on me that actually this thing we're talking about is real. And you begin, so many emotions, so many, past moments begin to flood the head. And I'm thinking, this is not you facing it. The
yeah,
person facing, I wonder what that person will be going through.
mm,
And you're kind of guilty of asking, what happened? Or you're
mm,
thinking, or calling them, you want to call them, and you see, is it a right time to call you? You don't know what to say. All of these things, even as supporters group, I'll say,
yeah,
it's hard to know how to
mm,
help.
mm.
Um, so I really don't know what kind of question, to ask from what I've just said.
Yeah, I hear you. You're right. It's even, funny enough. I've also just heard about someone recently, a dear friend who I haven't spoken to in a while, who has lost a loved one, and I'm in that space like, okay, do I haven't spoken to her
Yeah.
in a while. Now that suddenly she's lost a loved one, do I call? Do I? But I think, first of all, let's come from a place of love rather than
Okay.
overthinking it and saying, oh, I haven't called her in a few years, or I called yesterday. Anytime, and again, coming from a place of faith, if you
Mm,
feel the person heavy on your heart, pray for them. Can
mm,
send a text, because for me in the early days I'd put on my phone, it was off WhatsApp. It was later when I put it on that I saw people's messages. So even though people couldn't reach me on the
okay.
phone, their messages were there. So it could just be, just thinking of you, holding you up in prayer. It could be as simple as that, thinking
Mm,
of you, hold them. And again, depending on how close you are to the person, I don't think you necessarily need permission to go visit them because of your already existing relationship.
yeah.
You know, so again, depending on how close you are to the person who has lost a loved one, show up, clean up their house. I had people
Mm,
do that. I couldn't even think straight to know who was where. I just knew that someone will come and take my kids off me. I'm like, oh, thank you, just to give me time to
mm,
get myself together. So like I said, come from a place of love rather than overthinking it, because that
overthinking.
is what the griever will remember, that, oh, this person was me of, in my time of need.
Mm,
And, you said something about going away to cry. That's what many of us do. I think we need to normalize crying, and we need to normalize pain and grief. And if it's sitting again, depending on your relationship with the person, because you don't want
mm,
to that person who they're like, why is she crying? Do you see what I mean?
mm,
Depending on your relationship with the person, don't feel bad for crying with your friend.
mm,
Friends that cried with me, oh my gosh, I hold them so dear now, because I felt like they allowed me to be vulnerable, and they
mm.
allowed themselves to be vulnerable with me. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
there's so much, right? And then
Yeah.
again, because our culture doesn't necessarily support grieving publicly, and that's why a lot
Yeah.
of grievers isolate. I think we need to begin to normalize grief, normalize um, crying, and being there for other people. So yeah, it can be tricky. It can be.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't even lie about that. It can be tricky, but if we start from a place of love, I think we can navigate
Yeah. Mm,
those seasons. Yeah.
yeah. I think you've kind of answered the next question, which is how can people support those who get bereaved?
Yeah.
You've talked about childcare, just listen, and listen. Send messages, visit them. You know, groceries and all of that. You've mentioned all of that. Thank you.
But I
So,
was going to say one more thing, if that's okay, around um, so
how to
providing
support?
support.
Yes.
When it comes to providing emotional support, so I've talked about the practical side of things. Another thing, and I know I'd mentioned about not trying to make sense of what has happened. The other thing not to do is to compare or
Mm,
minimize that person's loss. That is so key, because what many of us do is we think it will make them feel better when and I remember somebody that lost something, and then they tell you this story
mm,
to make you feel better. But what you don't realize that you're doing is you're minimizing their loss. So if I use
mm,
myself as an example, when we lost our baby boy, I remember someone coming to the house and saying, "Oh, at least you guys hadn't invested so much in him." And I remember one of my uncles who's 15-year-old had just gotten admission to Cambridge or somewhere. I can't remember what he was saying. I know they had paid school fees and the boy died. In my mind, I'm like, what is my business with a VG? I am grieving the loss of my 7-month-old baby. So
mm.
why are you comparing my 7-month-old baby to a 15-year-old boy that I don't even know? Now, in fairness, they might think, oh, by telling me this
Yeah.
story,
Okay.
I will feel better. Like, thank God, though, I'm not invested. But that is no, that is the wrongest thing to do. Please do
Mm,
not minimize people's losses. Do not say, at least thank God you have 3 other children that you can
mm,
love. No, please, I'm begging you, don't do things like that. Because what
mm,
you're basically trying to tell the person is that their loss is not valid.
mm.
And guess what? The griever would isolate because they feel if I that they will think, are you the only one that has lost a baby before? Do you see what I mean? Even for example, if someone has miscarried, you shouldn't say
Okay.
things like at least you can get pregnant. No, that is wrong. So there's so many things we say that in
Mm,
our minds
mm.
we think will make sense to the
Yeah.
griever, but it doesn't. It doesn't make sense to them at
Then
all. Anyway, I can
adding, how do they say it? Adding salt to
yeah,
injury. Is
exactly.
it?
Yes. No, don't.
Mm, yeah. Well, insult to injury. Is that what they say? Yeah. Adding insult
Yeah.
to injury.
Hmm.
Okay, thank you very much. The final question, because I can see our time, and like I said,
Yes.
I didn't want it to go past 30 minutes, but there you go. When you're, it says time runs fast when you're having. It's not fun, but it's learning when you're
Yeah.
learning something
Yeah.
new, and
Yeah.
so yeah, thank you very much. I've learned so much now from what you said. We kind of repeat the story of Job in different ways. We kind of repeat it without realizing. I know we
Mm.
are the ones that will be like, why couldn't they just keep quiet? But one
Yeah.
is when you're in that situation, support, comforting other people, you see
Yeah.
yourself saying things that you're not supposed to say. So
Mm.
being led by
Yeah.
God, even being quiet is enough. I think
Yeah.
sometimes, most
Yeah.
yeah, it's more than enough when we're quiet. I know sometimes we kind of feel that awkward silence. You be like, maybe I need to just fill in the gap now by
Yeah.
saying something, and your head starts spinning. Oh, maybe I should say it, maybe I should say that. And maybe empathy, putting ourselves in the shoes of others. What would
Yeah.
you like people to say to you if you
Yeah.
were going through this? I think
Exactly.
that would yeah, thank you. And finally, at what point do you think the bereaved needs to move on? I know it's very relative. It's too enormous to trash out because we all are
Mhm.
different. And like you said before,
Mm.
there's no time limit. There's no. But from your point of experience and from people you have had contact with, at what point do you think they need to move on,
So it's interesting that you've used the word move on. I would
mm,
say move forward
move forward?
because
Okay,
move on almost tends to seem like, oh, moving
forget
on,
about
like
it.
exactly forget,
Okay, okay.
and
I
that is
apologize. I take that back my
oh no,
word.
no, it's fine. But that's and it's part of us, it's part of the education
Learning.
because that is now because many people are expecting you to move on.
Mm,
And the griever does not want to forget their loved ones, so they'll rather stay in pain and say, I'm not
mm,
moving on. Because if I move on, I'm going to forget my loved one. But when
mm.
you reframe that and say move forward,
Yeah.
you're still moving forward with the loss.
Mm,
However, it's like you're moving forward with a new set of emotions. Saying, okay, this has happened. I've, I've gone through the healing process, but I can move forward without the pain and still hold on to the happy memories. And that's
yeah.
possible. Because
Mm,
many people also think it's not possible um to move forward or to be okay after the death of a loved one. You can't still live a fulfilled life.
yeah.
And moving forward does not mean forgetting your loved one, because that's a mistake many people make. They think if I move forward or if I move on, I'm going to forget my loved one. I need the pain to remind me. You don't need the pain to remind you of your loved one. You don't. The pain is just added load. So The point at which a bereaved person moves forward is when they are ready to. Because again, you know, I've had situations where people reach out to me and say, "Oh, my friend lost a loved one. Please, can you work with her?" And my first thing is always, "Are they ready?" Because they're
Mm,
not ready, it's not gonna work. They have to be, when I say ready, mentally to say,
yeah.
"Okay, I don't want to carry the pain anymore. I want to resolve all of this so that I can feel better." And feeling better again doesn't mean, and I know I'm saying this over and over, but it's because I've met people who have said to me, "Oh, I like what you're doing, but I'm scared that if I go through this process and heal, I'm going to forget my loved one." And I'm like, "No, I think about my little boy every day. I talk about him every day. I will never forget him. You can never forget your husband that passed away. You can never forget your mom, your dad, your sibling.
Mm,
You will never forget them. But what you want to deal with or what you want to resolve is the pain that is
mm,
attached to the grief." So moving, the best time or the point to move on is when the person is ready. And again,
right.
that will differ for everyone. But it's when you've made up your mind to say, "Okay, I'm done. I'm done now." Because again, another thing with grieving is sometimes it affects your relationships because you're in this weird space. Oh, and I say weird loosely, weird space because people no longer can relate to you, which is
Mm,
not your fault in any way. And it's not simply because, "Well, I want to be able to relate to people. That's why I want to feel better." No, it's because you still have the fact that you're alive means there's still a plan and purpose for your own life. So
yeah.
how can you fulfill that plan and purpose with, without the pain attached to your grief and being able to help others or even comfort others in their own loss? Of course,
Mm,
again, that's not the first thing you want to do, but the point is you want to get to a place where you're a blessing to others,
mm,
you're not wallowing in your pain, and you're able to move forward with a new set of emotion. So it's when you get to that point and you're like, "Okay, I think I'm ready." That is the best. That is the right point to move
mm,
forward. Yeah.
mm. Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much. You've just put an icing on the cake when they are ready. And
Yeah.
they will say it when they are ready. Thank you.
Yeah.
Not like, oh, can I we want to suggest, but they will tell you when they're ready, when they need help. And to those who are bereaved, we feel your pain.
Yeah.
But get help when you need to. When you see that,
Yes.
it's not making sense anymore,
Mhm.
and you don't know how to go past it.
Yeah.
There are coaches here. Coach Detola Amure. I will put your details at the end of the video so that people who need to contact you to gain from your experience can also be able and be free to do so.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I really appreciate this time you
Oh,
spent.
thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share. I think
Thank you.
we need a lot more people talking around about the subject. Yeah, we do.
Mm, mm. It's
Thank you.
inevitable. There's nothing. Life happens. Like I always say, life happens. Nobody plans for it, but when it comes, make sure you're prepared.
Yeah.
Make sure you're prepared. That's it. So yeah, thank you very much, and I will see you later. Thank
Thank
you.
you. God
Thank
bless.
you. Amen. Thank you. So you've heard it all. You've heard it all. I'll put on the screen Coach Detola's contact. So if it makes you feel better, please do. That's what she's here to do. She's adding value to her world, and many people have testified about it. So, thank you very much for watching again. Remember to like this video. Remember to share it. Remember to make your comments right here. Have you felt grief before? How did you deal with it? You might want to share your sentence on the comment section. Could actually help someone. Please share what you think people need to do. How have you helped somebody before? How have you been a good supporter? Have you built a support system around yourself? Are you a loner at the moment? And when you face issues, do you know people you can go to? So please write in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Hey, remember, the next video on grief will be for those who are wondering, what do I do immediately I lose a loved one? People might be running around, Googling things and trying to find solutions. Insurance, mortgage, family, school. Who do I need to tell? Do I need to tell the boss of the bereaved person? Things like that. We want to do a video, a second part to this, and we will be bringing someone who is actually knowledgeable in that area. I believe we will get a professional to come and talk to us about what actually needs to be done. Thank you very much for your time here, and remember to like, to share, to subscribe, and thank you for always coming to hear what we have for you. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye till next time.